My phone pinged with a patent notification. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My algorithm, my 3 years of work, now patented under my father's name alone. "Your life's work has been secured," he announced, raising his champagne glass with a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. The dinner table fell silent. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling as the algorithm I'd spent 3 years developing was now legally his. Mom glanced nervously between us while my brother avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by his roast chicken. The family dinner celebrating my breakthrough had just become a crime scene. "You wouldn't have known how to navigate the medical establishment," Dad continued, his voice carrying that familiar condescending tone he reserved for patients and family alike. "I protected your work." The dining room of our Chicago lakefront home, where I'd foolishly agreed to discuss my research, suddenly felt suffocating. 3 years of sleepless nights, rejected grant applications, and breakthrough code, all reduced to a patent number with someone else's name. Protected it? I placed my phone screen up on the mahogany table. "The PCT/US filing lists you as the sole inventor, Dad. Not me. Not even as a contributor." My brother Kevin cleared his throat. "Jane, Dad has the connections to implement this. It's already being considered by 3 major hospital systems." Of course he knew. As the family's trusted attorney who'd helped me draft early non-disclosure agreements, he'd been the perfect inside man. "When?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "Last Tuesday," Dad replied, setting down his glass with the precision of a surgeon. The approval came through faster than expected. He smiled. "Congratulations to us." With mechanical calm, I reached for my laptop bag and pulled out my original laboratory notebook, the one document I hadn't digitized or shared with either of them. I placed it on the table, flipped to a dog-eared page, and turned it toward my father. "Explain page 94, then," I said. "The algorithm's critical recursive function. Explain it to me right now if you're the inventor." His smile faltered as he glanced at equations he couldn't possibly understand. "This isn't the place, Jane," my mother interjected, always the peacekeeper. "It's a family dinner." "Exactly," I replied, standing up. "And apparently, in this family, theft is on the menu." The doorbell rang, startling all of us. Dad's eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me with sudden calculation. "Were you expecting someone?" I wasn't, but the timing couldn't have been more perfect. "I'll get it," I said quickly, moving toward the foyer before anyone could stop me. Behind me, I heard urgent whispers between my father and brother, panic creeping into their voices. The confidence they'd displayed moments ago was cracking. Whatever they'd planned, they hadn't expected confrontation tonight. I pulled open the front door to find Professor Winters, my research advisor from Northwestern, standing on the porch. His silver hair was windswept, and his expression grave. "Jane, thank God," he said, clutching a leather portfolio. "I've been trying to reach you. The university just received notice that my father patented my algorithm. I finished," ushering him inside. "I just found out too." The professor's eyes widened as he took in the scene in the dining room, my family frozen around the table, my lab notebook open, tension hanging in the air like smoke. "Dr. Livingston," he acknowledged my father with a chilled professionalism. "I'm surprised to see you've taken an interest in recursive neural networks and predictive biomedicine, especially since your last published research was on laparoscopic techniques 12 years ago." Dad stood up, adopting his department head posture. "Robert, this is a family matter." "It stopped being just a family matter when you filed that patent," Professor Winters replied, setting his portfolio on the table. "The algorithm was developed using university resources under my supervision. Jane has documented everything." My brother Kevin jumped in, his lawyer mode activating. "The university has no claim. Jane worked on this independently, outside of her fellowship duties." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Is that what Dad told you, Kevin?" "Show him the patent filing date," I challenged, looking directly at my father. My mother placed her hand on Dad's arm. William, what have you done? Dad's jaw tightened. Secured a future for this family. Jane's algorithm can revolutionize early cancer detection, but she was just sitting on it, perfecting it endlessly instead of implementing it. I was conducting validation trials. I snapped, pulling out a small black external hard drive from my jacket pocket and placing it on the table. With actual patient data, following ethical protocols, getting peer review, the hard drive sat between us like a grenade. Everyone's eyes fixed on it. What's on that? Kevin asked, his voice betraying nervousness. Everything, I replied coldly. Every version of the code. Every test result. Every email between us discussing my work. And, interestingly, the unauthorized access logs showing when copies were made from my home system 3 weeks ago while I was at a conference in Boston. Dad's face drained of color. You broke into my apartment? The realization hit like physical pain. My own father. Professor Winters opened his portfolio and removed several documents. Jane, the university is prepared to challenge this patent immediately. We have your original grant proposals, progress reports, and computing resource allocations. You're making a mistake, Dad said, addressing the professor while pointedly ignoring me. This is a family disagreement that's being blown out of proportion. A family disagreement? I echoed in disbelief. You stole my life's work and put your name on it. Kevin stepped forward. The patent can be amended to include Jane as co-inventor. We're not unreasonable. Co-inventor. I stared at my brother. I am the inventor. There is no co involved. Be practical, Jane. Dad cut in. With my name and reputation, this algorithm will be adopted by every major hospital in the country. Without me, it would languish in peer review for years. His arrogance was breathtaking. For 35 years, I'd lived in the shadow of the great Dr. William Livingston, seeking his approval. Now I realized I'd never had a chance of earning it. He'd only ever seen me as an extension of himself, my achievements ultimately his to claim. Mom, I turned to her. Did you know about this? Her eyes dropped to her lap. Her silence was answer enough. I picked up the hard drive and my notebook. I'm leaving. Professor Winters and I are going directly to the university legal team. By morning, there will be an injunction filed. Jane, don't be dramatic, Dad said, his voice hardening. If you push this, I'll be forced to defend myself. Think about what that will do to your career, challenging one of the most respected surgeons in the Midwest. I paused at the dining room threshold and turned back to face my family, these strangers wearing familiar faces. You know what, Dad? For the first time, I'm not afraid of you. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of depositions, affidavits, and emergency meetings with the university's legal team. I barely slept, running on adrenaline and betrayal, my phone constantly buzzing with messages from my parents and brother, alternating between pleas, justifications, and thinly veiled threats about family loyalty. I ignored them all. On the fourth morning, I arrived at Professor Winters' office to find him speaking with someone I didn't recognize, a woman in her 50s with a sharp suit and sharper eyes. Jane, this is Margot Chun from the Office of Scientific Integrity, he introduced us. She's interested in your situation. Ms. Chen extended her hand. Dr. Livingston, the younger, she clarified with a thin smile. Your case has raised several red flags beyond the patent issue. What do you mean? I asked, accepting her firm handshake. Your father's research center has been implementing versions of your algorithm in clinical settings already, she explained, opening a laptop. Without proper review or authorization. My stomach dropped. That's not possible. The algorithm isn't ready for clinical deployment. The validation phase isn't complete. Professor Winters looked grim. Show her the email, Margot. Miss Chen turned her laptop toward me. On screen was an email from my father to the hospital's executive board, dated 3 months ago, long before the patent filing. It outlined plans to implement, his breakthrough diagnostic algorithm across all oncology departments by year-end. He's been claiming this work for months, I whispered, scanning the details. Before he even had the full code. Which means he's been using an incomplete version, Professor Winters said gravely. The implications hit me like a freight train. An unfinished algorithm making diagnostic recommendations could endanger patients. The recursive learning components weren't properly constrained yet. They could produce false positives or, worse, false negatives. I need to see what version they're using, I said urgently. Right now. Ms. Chen nodded. That's why I'm here. We're conducting an immediate review, and we need the algorithm's creator to evaluate what's been implemented. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had stolen my work, and now I was being called in to fix his mess. There's more, Professor Winters added, hesitantly. The hospital received a sizable grant from HealthCorp Industries based on preliminary results from the algorithm's implementation. $5 million. He's profiting from this already? My voice rose. The grant lists both you and your father as principal investigators, Ms. Chen said. Though according to records, you never signed the application. Another forgery. Another betrayal. I need to make a stop before we go to the hospital, I said firmly. 30 minutes later, we pulled up to my parents' house. My father's car was in the driveway. He'd been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. Perfect. I rang the doorbell, the same one that had announced Professor Winters' arrival during that fateful dinner. This time, my mother answered, her face drawn with worry. Jane, she breathed. Thank God you're here. Your father is. Where is he? I interrupted, stepping past her. In his study. Jane, please, he's devastated. The hospital board called him in yesterday, and I moved through the house with singular purpose, Professor Winters and Ms. Chen following behind. Without knocking, I pushed open the door to my father's study. He sat behind his desk, looking smaller somehow, his imposing presence diminished. When he saw me, he stood quickly. Jane, finally. We need to talk about how to fix this misunderstanding. I laughed bitterly. Is that what we're calling theft and fraud now? His eyes flicked to the two people behind me, assessing the threat. This is a private family matter. No, I corrected him. This is a matter of scientific integrity, patient safety, and criminal misconduct. I placed my laptop on his desk and opened it. I need access to the hospital servers. Now, Jane, be reasonable. The algorithm is helping people. An incomplete algorithm could be killing people, I countered. Login credentials. Now, for a moment, I thought he might refuse. Then Ms. Chen stepped forward. Dr. Livingston, I'm from the Office of Scientific Integrity. Refusing to cooperate will only compound the issues you're facing. With reluctance, he entered his credentials into my laptop. I immediately began examining the implementation files, my heart racing as I analyzed what version of my work was being used. It's version 3.2, I said to Professor Winters, who leaned over my shoulder. From 8 months ago. Before I fixed the false negative rate in the lung nodule detection module. Is it dangerous? My mother asked from the doorway, her voice small. I looked up at my father. It could be missing early-stage lung cancers. Telling patients they're fine when they're not. The color drained from his face. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not for his career or reputation, but for what he might have done. I didn't know, he whispered. I thought it was ready. You couldn't know, I replied coldly. Because you're not the inventor. Ms. Chen spoke up. We need to implement a patch immediately and review all cases where this system provided diagnostic input. I nodded, already typing. I can deploy the current version directly, but we'll need to flag every diagnosis made in the past 3 months for human review. As I worked, I felt my father watching me, the daughter he'd simultaneously underestimated and exploited. The algorithm flowing through my fingertips was the culmination of my life's work, a complex dance of code that he could never truly understand, much less create. The latest version also has safeguards to prevent unauthorized modifications, I explained to Miss Chin, pointedly not looking at my father. It creates tamper-evident logs and requires multi-factor authentication for any changes to the diagnostic parameters. You built security into it? Professor Winters asked. I nodded, remembering the weeks I'd spent hardening the system after experiencing a strange sense of unease about sharing my progress with my family. Some part of me had known, perhaps, that my work needed protection even from those who should have been my biggest supporters. The patch is uploading, I announced. All new scans will use the corrected algorithm, and I've flagged the previous cases for review. My father cleared his throat. Jane, I never meant to save it. I cut him off, closing my laptop. The patent will be corrected, the grant money will be returned, and you'll face whatever consequences the hospital board and medical ethics committee decide. And the family? My mother asked, tears in her eyes. I looked between them. My father who had stolen from me, my mother who had enabled him, and somewhere in this house, my brother who had helped make it legally possible. That's up to you, I said finally. I didn't break this family. You did. 3 months later, I stood at the podium in the university's largest lecture hall, facing an audience of medical professionals, tech industry representatives, and students. The room was packed, with people standing along the walls and sitting in the aisles. The Mediscan algorithm represents a fundamental shift in how we approach early cancer detection, I explained, gesturing to the complex visualization behind me. By analyzing patterns that human radiologists might miss and learning from each scan it processes, the system becomes more accurate over time. In the front row, Professor Winters nodded encouragingly. Beside him sat Margot Chin and representatives from 3 major hospital systems, all there to witness the official launch of my algorithm under its proper attribution. But technology is only as ethical as the people who control it, I continued, clicking to a new slide showing the system's transparent reporting features. That's why Mediscan includes robust safeguards. All diagnostic suggestions are explained, all data usage is transparent, and the system never makes a final diagnosis without human medical review. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. In the back of the room, partially hidden by a column, stood my brother Kevin. He caught my eye and gave a small, uncertain nod. He'd reached out last week, the first contact from my family since the investigation began, asking if he could attend today. I hadn't responded but wasn't surprised to see him. The path to today's launch has not been straightforward, I acknowledged, my voice steady. As some of you know, there were complications regarding the patent and initial unauthorized implementations. A diplomatic understatement. My father had resigned his position at the hospital following the ethics investigation. The patent had been reassigned solely to me, with the university retaining certain rights. The medical board had placed him on probation, allowing him to continue seeing patients but stripping him of research privileges. Those issues have been resolved, I continued, and today, I'm pleased to announce that all proceeds from Mediscan licensing will fund a new foundation dedicated to ethical medical AI development and provide free access to this technology for underserved communities. Applause broke out. I waited for it to subside before clicking to my final slide. I'd like to thank the University Ethics Committee, Professor Robert Winters, and especially Ms. Margot Chin from the Office of Scientific Integrity. Their commitment to ensuring that innovation is not just powerful, but ethical has been invaluable. As the formal presentation ended and the audience began to approach with questions, I noticed Kevin making his way toward me. I braced myself for the conversation I'd been avoiding. Congratulations, he said when he finally reached me, his voice carrying an emotion I couldn't quite identify. It was an incredible presentation. Thank you for coming, I replied neutrally. He shifted uncomfortably. Dad watched the live stream. He wouldn't admit it, but I saw him. I felt a complex wave of emotions, anger, vindication, and an unwanted flicker of satisfaction that my father had witnessed my triumph. How is he? I asked, surprising myself with the question. humbled, changed. The probation has been difficult for him. Kevin hesitated. He's talking about writing a paper on ethics in medical innovation. I think he's trying to find a way forward. That's something I managed. Kevin looked directly at me for the first time. He was wrong, Jane. We all were. I should have protected you, not him. Before I could respond, Professor Winters approached with the hospital representatives, eager to introduce me. I excused myself from Kevin with a nod, neither accepting nor rejecting his implied apology. The reception lasted hours. By the time the last question was answered and the final contract details discussed, evening had fallen. I gathered my materials and headed to my office to collect my things. To my surprise, I found my mother waiting outside the door. "Your assistant told me I might find you here," she explained, her hands clasped tightly together. I watched online. "You were brilliant." "Mom," I sighed, unlocking my office door. "I'm exhausted." "If you're here to defend Dad again, I'm not," she interrupted, following me inside. "I'm here because I owe you an apology of my own. I knew what your father was planning, and I did nothing to stop it." I set my laptop down on the desk, studying her face. She looked older, the past months having etched new lines around her eyes. "Why?" I asked simply. She sank into a chair. I've been asking myself that same question. For 40 years, I've enabled his worst impulses because it was easier than standing up to him. I convinced myself it was loyalty. She looked up at me. It took watching my daughter's work being stolen to realize it was cowardice. The rawness of her admission caught me off guard. "I left him, Jane. 3 weeks ago." "You what?" "I'm staying with your aunt in Milwaukee. I've filed for divorce." She smiled sadly. "You showed me what courage looks like. Standing alone against your entire family for what's right." I leaned against my desk, absorbing this unexpected development. "I never wanted to break up the family, Mom." "You didn't," she assured me. "We did that ourselves long before this happened. But maybe now we can build something better. Something honest." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "This was your grandmother's. I want you to have it." I unwrapped it carefully to find my grandmother's antique silver compact mirror, the one she'd carried through medical school in the 1940s when women doctors were rare and unwelcome. Inside was inscribed, "See yourself clearly, always." "She would have been so proud of you," my mother said softly. I closed my fingers around the compact, feeling its weight. The weight of legacy, of female pioneers, of standing firm when it would be easier to bend. "Thank you," I whispered. Later that night, in my apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, I sat at my desk reviewing the implementation schedules for 3 more hospital systems. My algorithm, properly attributed, ethically deployed, and now helping patients as it was meant to, was spreading across the country. On my screen, a notification appeared, an email from my father. After a moment's hesitation, I opened it. "Jane, congratulations on today's launch. The system you've created will save countless lives." That was always what mattered most to both of us, even when I lost sight of it. "I've attached a draft of a paper I'm writing on ethics in medical innovation. In it, I fully acknowledge your sole authorship of the Mediskin algorithm and my own failure to uphold the principles I've taught for decades. This doesn't undo what I did. Nothing can. But perhaps it might serve as a warning to others in positions of power not to repeat my mistakes. If you're willing, I would value your feedback before submission." Dad, I stared at the email for a long time, particularly at the attached document titled Ethical Boundaries, a Personal Failure and Professional Warning. Finally, I clicked reply and typed, "I'll review it. Send me the data on the patients who received diagnoses during the unauthorized implementation period as well. I want to ensure no one fell through the cracks." Jane, it wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was a beginning, a professional acknowledgement that might, someday, open the door to something more. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights reflecting on the dark surface of the lake. My algorithm was out there now, scanning images, finding patterns too subtle for human eyes, protected by the safeguards I'd built to ensure it could never be misused again. In protecting my work, I'd found my voice. In standing alone, I'd discovered who would stand with me. And in losing my family, I'd found the possibility of building a better one based on truth, respect, and ethical boundaries that could not be crossed. My grandmother's compact sat on my desk, its inscription a reminder: see yourself clearly always. Finally, I did. What would you do if your family stole your life's work? Would you fight back like I did, or try to preserve family peace at all costs? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.